You're right. Later. Yeah. Don't want to talk to you about that. Marshall will be listening to this before delivery, so we're going to grab you for everybody.
He'll come back later.
I just shot out because well, we're working. You can sit by me. You gotta have your back to me. Got your back.
Actually, I'll go one more now so the picture can sit next to
you. Here, why don't you sit first? It's like a picture. Yeah, that's fine. He's trying to speak further.
No, I wanted to go.
I told him. I left that door open in my email.
Well, I know.
We're talking about that.
Congratulations, Aaron. Yes, thank you.
So Richard, so here's the dark side. What's it called? It fits. Are you ready? We're just waiting for you.
That's probably better wait till 2.
Oh no, it's actually gym ties for 1:45.
You're late.
Just 15 minutes of browsing.
Well, the webinar ran over, so you were scared. So you're not that one. Just a couple of minutes.
Is there a reason we have half the lights on? Christina, can you hit the lights?
The webinar.
Oh, there it is.
Let there be light. Yeah, I don't see
I thought he was just conserving the power bill.
We wanted to have an intimate setting.
Save money so they can put it in probation budget. Okay, let's call the meeting to order. This will start off because we have a lot of faces in the room. Some of them are from past years, some of them are new. So let's go around the room. We'll have everybody introduce themselves. I'm Jim Chapman, chair of the board and the committee.
Aaron Albaugh, Board of Supervisors, District 4.
I'm Bob Burns, County Council.
Julie
Is that
Morgan.
enough name for a movie?
Oh, Bob.
Julie Morgan, Assistant to CEO. Regina Schaaf, Executive Assistant to CEO.
Richard Egan, CA. Lori Anderson, Planning and Building Services.
Jim Renning, Chief Probation Officer.
John Reno, Sheriff's Office.
Gina, Sheriff's Office. Brooke Suarez, Planning and Building Fiscal Officer.
Eric Nielsen, Community Social Services.
Yvonne Smith, Chief Fiscal Manager, Health and Social Services. Jessica Valdinas, Fiscal Officer, Probation. Sarah Booth, Probation.
Dan Schluter, Assessor. Tony Shaw, Deputy CAO. Galen Norwood, Planning and Building Services. Diana.
Diana, Auditor. Max Cardenas, Treasury Tax Collector.
Michelle Latimer, Program Coordinator for the District Attorney.
Luigi Nadi, Public Works. Christina Navarre, Associate Treasury Tax Collector.
Aaron Millar, Public Works Department.
Kevin Jones, Sheriff's Office.
And at the door.
Photographer.
And state your name, Eileen.
Thank you.
Okay. Eileen Spencer is at the door taking pictures. Okay, with that, we'll move ahead to public comment. Do we have any public comment before we proceed with the agenda? Hearing none, then we'll approve the minutes of the meeting. We have none because this is our first meeting for the year. So that takes us to our next agenda item, which is budget. So we'll get a budget status update. So Mr. Egan.
Sure, I'll start off and you'll let me jump in as we get into this. As you all know, we've solicited budget requests from all the departments. We have received most of them, although I think there's a few notable exceptions to that. Julie, do you have a list of who hasn't submitted a request?
I think I have everybody but the clerks, which I have input numbers for.
Okay, so...
And then transportation, but we'll connect on that, whether we're going to include them. I don't have those numbers.
So it's my plan, in lieu of an actual request from a department, to put in probably similar to what the request was last year.
For the departments that haven't.
For the departments that have now. It seems like there's only one. So anyway, Julie's input that information into our Excel spreadsheet budget form, in the draft form, and in the column. Did you hand? Does everybody have?
I didn't. You want to make copies?
Yeah, I think that'd be good. And maybe I'll just go over it in general while Julie's doing that. So what we did is we input the projected ending fiscal year fund balance, which we won't really know exact amounts until sometime in July, probably, Diane. After the year closes, we'll have final fund balances, but in lieu of that, we have entered what Diana's best guess is at this point of what the ending fund balance will be as a starting point. Then we've added to that the estimated revenues by budget unit, of course, and fund. I think they're relatively conservative estimates at this point. We'll be revising those as we go along. To that, so you add those two together, fund balance plus projected revenues, you come up with the total available funds in a given fund. And there's that total column. And then we've got the department requests that you each have submitted. And what I asked departments to do, and if anybody's done this differently, we need to correct it with Julie, but I asked everyone to include in their request all of the reclassification requests or new positions that we're going to talk about later in that request. So it's it's the gross number. It's the if everybody got what they wanted, that's the requested number, which is I think as it should. So then I've got next to that I've got a draft recommended budget, which is a column that I'll be adjusting as we go along here with input from all of you, and as we adjust revenue estimates and those sorts of things. I'll be adjusting that, but that's going to be the main column that I'll be changing. That'll be the draft recommended budget. So you take the funds available minus the draft recommended, and that'll give you the projected ending year fund balance, and that'll be on the right column. In looking at those, Neil will have this as soon as Julie gets back. There's, of course, like there always is this time of year, a significant difference between the projected available funds and the projected departmental funds. Right now, the rough numbers are about $3 million in the general fund, about $3.7 million in public safety, and about $4.25 in probation, which are the three major funds that we're going to be focusing on there. So that kind of shows the magnitude of, we'll just take a break for a minute while Julie passes those in.
Go ahead.
And as those are being passed around, if everybody would keep in mind, these spreadsheets are draft in nature. And they probably, you should probably be careful to just throw them away after we're done with a given session so that they don't get confused with the next rendition, because we'll be updating this daily as we go along through the process. If everybody has it, if you want to just follow through, we'll just look at the general fund just so everybody kind of understands how the spreadsheet works. If you look at the fund, the 2016-17 fund balance, $223,000, that's what Diana anticipates the ending general fund balance to be. And there's a lot of assumptions built into that number. I hope that it's higher than that. I think our revenues are fairly conservative that we have estimated through the end of the year, so hopefully that number ends up being higher. The estimated financing sources for the 16-17 year, that'd be the expected revenue for the general fund, 15,562,000. Add those two together and you get the 15.7. So in the next column, we've gotten in the general fund $18,596,000 in departmental requests, leaving the projected end fund balance at 2.8. So that's, does anybody have any questions about the mechanics of those formulas? And the reason I'm going through all this for those of you that it's remedial on is that we'll be using this spreadsheet as we go through the process, and it would be kind of important to understand where it's coming from. And you can look at all the pertinent funds there. You aggregate it all, so we have total departmental requests of $111,641,000. There's that. We have not, as of yet, gone through budget unit by budget unit to scrutinize expenditures or revenues. The process so far has been to just throw all the requests together with some assumptions.
So these budget numbers here include all the helicopters and submarines and torpedo boats and so forth.
Right.
Okay.
Any questions about any of that? Julie, do you have anything to add on that?
No, we're just getting started, and then we'll be probably on the 21st, it's up to Richard, doing a recommended budget just as to continue operation, and then we'll continue through the budget process.
Right.
Until we can get something to have public.
Thank you for bringing that up. So we're required by the government code to adopt a proposed budget before the end of the year, end of the fiscal year. And as in the past, I'll be recommending that we adopt last year's budget.
Yeah, they generally just rip off the cover of the final budget last year and put the proposed budget on it. Yeah.
So we'll be doing that before the end of the year.
Yeah, that'll be at the board meeting of June 28th or
21st.
I've got on the 21st, hopefully, and we're going to put it together this week. It's a resolution.
28th to be cut into the two.
yeah, I was going to say.
And then the other thing that Julie and I spoke about was we'd like to schedule a budget committee meeting every other week until the budget's adopted. If we find that we don't need a meeting, we'll just cancel them, but I think that'll, for the sake of calendar.
Starting, what, on Tuesdays?
Mhm.
Try to make sure and keep those dates open. Tuesdays, so it'd be the 21st, and then it'd be July 5th.
Is that right, Julie? But-
We go back to a Tuesday.
Yes, I think that's correct. So 21st, 5th, which is, yeah. Maybe at the next meeting, we'll discuss the meeting of the 5th, if there's going to be a lot of people out for the holiday.
Yeah, that may be it. I'm going to be probably coming back on that day, so if that's the week we go, we might consider moving it to the 6th.
All right. So any questions about the budget in general, requests, or before we go on to the reclassification? Well, let's move on to the reclassification and reorganization request, which is what I wanted to spend most of today's time on. And if Julie passed out. Julie, would you pass out the spreadsheet?
I copied it all in the packet.
Okay. So as you all know, we had a lot of reclassification requests, reorganization requests, so we're batching them all together for discussion here so that I can make one recommendation to the board in conjunction, hopefully before the budget's adopted, but in conjunction with the budget for what reclassifications can occur. This will require some consultation with the effective bargaining units, because some of these involve changes in job descriptions, actual changes in job descriptions. And to the extent that they can, that'll take, I don't expect that to take a great deal of time because they're, I think, each going to be an increase in compensation along with the change in job duties. So I don't think there will be a lot of resistance on the bargaining unit's part, but we will have to consult with them. Meet and confer. So I guess at this point, I would like to just kind of go through these department by department, ask each department to briefly discuss the reasons for the request. You've all got in front of you the costs that we've calculated, the increase in costs that we've calculated based on the request. What Julie's done in calculating those costs is rather than try to anticipate each position step and range where they currently are to what step and range they go to, we've assumed a midpoint C step. Is that right? Is that what we decided?
In some cases, that didn't work.
Okay.
Yes, I targeted for that if that was a new split.
Okay. So point being, this isn't going to be exact position by position, but we're trying to get a magnitude of cost based on kind of a midpoint of the classification. I think that's the best way to look at it. So, any questions before we launch into each department? All right, well, let's do it. Warren?
Certainly, you said this morning that it might be beneficial to dissect it or bisect it into what's being recommended as being competitive versus somebody that's having their job description really needs to be modified to reflect what they're currently doing. So in my case, out of the 6 proposed changes, really only one is of the latter, the change in job description, and that's the building technician. And when we looked around, we see that in most jurisdictions there are usually 2 different levels of technicians, and obviously one being more general and one being able to do more complex things. And in this case, we have a building technician that's been there for a long time. We've been absent a building official for many years now, several years, and the technology has changed quite a bit, and we have somebody doing a lot more than what's in their job description. And so that's proposed to go from a 15 to an 18. That's a UPEC bargaining unit. The rest, starting at the bottom, chief planner, surveyor, building official, assistant director, and director, we feel just all need to be bumped up, essentially 2 ranges to be competitive. We've spent $10,000 over the last 2 years trying to meet with somebody and discuss the possibility of them being a building official. We've had 2 people that wanted to meet with us, and one was grossly unqualified, and the other was just had some baggage and was not going to work. So we just can't be competitive with the wage that we're proposing, and I think we see the same in the other fields as well. So that's essentially it in a nutshell. There's very detailed. I mean, we took the time to look at, I don't know, 4 or 5 different counties that are similar to us, and that's where we generated what we thought the range should be for those jobs, and that's detailed in my staff report. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. There's questions on that.
Maureen, with the building technician, you've got it proposed as one of 2 things, is that right? Either it's a new classification, senior building technician, right, or a series of a 1-2.
Right. And, you know, I would actually yield to personnel to know which is more consistent with our practices.
And I think that the way that we've been trying to move is towards the series of the 1-2, so that there's kind of a promotional opportunity for people within the same classification. So that would be my preference. We went that route.
I certainly don't see a problem with that. It's long overdue in this case, and it's probably the single most important recognition in my group.
purpose of that request.
I've got one question about your code enforcement officer. Is that, where are you at on that? Are you still looking for somebody on
We
that field?
proposed in our budget to add an additional officer, and so that would mean 2 officers. We have 1 officer now, and we're proposing to have an additional one in this budget, like we did last year.
And those aren't included in here because they're existing classifications.
So when you were dealing with the, talking about the building official and the county surveyor position, you stated where when those positions are taken, the director and assistant director are left to manage these divisions, the director, assistant director often do not have the proper license and technical knowledge of the intricacies of these positions. So you're like practicing without a license.
Well, I'm officially I'm the building official, but I'm depending on a consultant, which is Wildan, who has a license and expertise, so that from a legal standpoint, we have somebody on the books that is, qualified and's been in the field and has the licenses. But as a practice, I'm the guy at the other side of the table answering questions, and I refer to Wildan all the time. But it's not the best practice. It's certainly not the most economical
Yeah, I was going
for
to say
us.
they're expensive, and it's kind of like the local attendants with the doctors and nurses and stuff in the medical offices where you can fill the position, but you're paying a real premium to do that.
Right, and we're picking up. I don't know what happened over the last year, but we went from the crash, and we've had no homes being built. It was cheaper to buy a house, and all of a sudden we have 18 homes going permitted, and that's not to mention all the remodels that were always popular.
If you don't know what happened, I mean, it's all, everybody else knows the person in the White House. So I don't know that person.
Well, all of a sudden people are loosening up their wallets and wanting to build homes again. So that's good.
Any other questions of the department? I mean, I think today we're just getting a sense for what, so this is really basically just ratcheting up the salary base to try to be more competitive in that field is the primary basis. Okay, next. Auditor.
Basically, what I would like to do, and it's been long overdue, is to reclassify the payroll supervisor position to payroll supervisor. The complexity of payroll is just growing yearly, and we are not paying a wage that's going to keep up to keep somebody in that position technically.
How long is the person that's been in there now?
She's been in there a year.
A year. Yeah, because she took over
For
from
Laura.
Laura that when she transferred over to.
Correct. And I know we wanted to do this when Laura was in there, and we forgot that.
So did she start out like an A or B step, the one that's there now, so she's had some increase, but you're just needing to raise the range itself?
Raise the range.
I'm for screening, so you were
And
following.
Diane, kind of the same question as for Maureen. Right now, you maybe have somebody in there we want to move up to the higher level, but would a series classification be appropriate in that classification where we're like a 20, 22?
Well, that's why I have it at 21, 22.
But you, oh, okay, a 21, 23.
So she has
It would be
basically,
a split classification.
yeah. So they could start out if they don't have all the qualifications that you
We
really
have a couple
want.
years of training before we
Yeah.
go into this industry.
And that makes a lot of sense.
And how does that compare with other, maybe tax collector's office or other positions? Is that?
I think that is probably what Christina's range is it not, Christina, but you're not confidential?
I honestly can't remember.
I think it's what the associate treasurer tax collector is at.
Okay. Public Works.
Yeah, my request is, currently we have 3 custodians. My request is to increase one of those positions up to a senior custodian, basically has some supervisory. What we've done last year is change the the staffing and the way we do our custodian a little differently. Always in the past, we've always had one person assigned to different buildings. Last year, through staffing changes, we were able to try something different where we have basically a crew of 2 and 3 going in early in the mornings and hitting all the buildings. It's working out very well. The issue we have now is basically all the custodians are at the same classification. So this would allow one of them to be a senior level, be able to supervise the crew.
So they're kind of like a room board role.
Exactly.
Kind of like what you do with the road crews.
Yes.
You do that.
Yeah. Because right now the supervisor for the custodians are buildings and grounds supervisor, and he basically works a different shift.
I think you can be a lot more productive when you do it as a...
The group is working out very well. It's getting in there.
It's been noticeable.
Okay, great. Thank you.
While we're on Public Works, Larry, we've discussed a little bit over the last couple of years bolstering buildings and grounds, Public Works staff to do more projects, and I know your custodian position is really geared to address that. Did you address in other projects?
In the budget request, I have another, there's been a vacant position, buildings and grounds position for a few years. I've requested that that be funded this next year. Now, over last year, it'll give us, last year we were able to increase one buildings and grounds worker, this will give us the second one. So,
Is it possible to clone Pete?
that would be nice.
Have a second one? I mean, because one of the things, from the board's perspective, and this is no criticism of the department, because you can only do so much with what you have. But with all the, especially with the buildings that we have scattered around, the age of the buildings and the long list of maintenance needs and the long-range plan that has been presented by Richard and adopted by the board, if there was ways to, sometimes the funding is available, but but it's the time frame that you have and only one person can do. I think it's a real bottleneck, and I think if you want to be more ambitious in terms of doing it, sometimes spending a little extra now to be able to accelerate that will save us in the long haul the cost of what the project is. And I use as a good example is the most recent project dealing with the ramp at Vets Hall. He started working on that as a concept and as a project 7-8 years ago, and because of the priorities of the other projects, it's no disrespect to the department, because you got to take care of the brush fires before you can take care of the rest. So that project, because of the delays, it probably cost us close to twice what it would have been had we gotten the project done early on. And so spending a few extra thousand back then to have the extra staffing, accelerating that project would offset in the long run what would be the long-term costs of the project. And that's just one of hundreds that we have laying around. So
right. The new position for the buildings and grounds, the thought on that will give us more hands-on, which in turn will free up the buildings and grounds supervisor, who in turn should be doing a lot of stuff that Pete is doing right now.
Share. You still got to have Pete there,
but there's a lot of stuff that the buildings and grounds supervisor could be doing that Pete is doing right now. So
I get you there, and I think that's something that we need to try to figure out how to do that. Because I know from the board's frustration is sometimes the delays that are there, and it could be something as simple as that. How do we free up that guy's time to be able to help Pete more? And if this is a way to move in that direction to accomplish that, you got me.
Yep, like for one instance, right now, if business ground supervisor is doing the on-ground stuff, we have to show a consultant or a repair guy at the shop. He's running out there to do that, which takes him away from the office and doing all the other stuff he should do.
It does, yeah, it does. Okay. So I don't know, Aaron, what do you think? From the board's perspective, I know the board would like to see more rather than less. So if there's ways to augment, and I think this is an area that definitely deserves some recognition and attention. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Okay, yes, Veteran Service Officer, just take the opportunity to let you all know Kathy Struble will be announcing her resignation to the Board of Supervisors at the next meeting. She's taken another job locally. She'll be locally, and she's interested in staying on to help us through a transition. We've begun recruitment for another BSA. That'll be coming to the board, but that's why she's not. I think that's why she's not here today. But she has requested that I think her request is to add half-time.
Yes, she wants to make her half-time a full-time, and she just submitted it with the reclass paperwork.
Right.
And this is the cost of the other half. So my understanding was it was one person full-time.
Yes.
So right now, the budget is 1.5 persons in the budget, and this would make it 2 full
Yes.
positions.
Yeah, there's a BSO and
Half of this there. And at one time, there was 2 full positions in that department, and I think probably when the budget cuts from the 2007 to 11 timeframe when we had a lot of reduction, that position got scaled back, that second position there. And that was also around that same time as we got those peer specialists that were funded through that grant that Mel was able to get through Health and Social Services. So that made operating this program with that half-time position a little bit more feasible.
Yeah, so in terms of budgeting this year, what I've discussed with Kathy and would be presented to the board is that she would stay on a part-time, maybe a couple days a week capacity through the transition. There would be some, certainly some savings there for maybe 90 days or so into the new fiscal year.
But I think that when you make those presentations, or when you make the representations to the board, though, in the budget is, even though we may incur some savings during this particular fiscal year, we really need to appreciate and recognize what the full cost is for a full year for future budget years, because otherwise you're going to inherit budget liabilities that become problematic later on. So, okay,
All right.
Probation. Oh my gosh.
Here we go.
So, what we've done is...
Welcome, Jennifer. We're happy to see you.
Thank you. What we've done is we've looked at really creating a promotable structure within the entire department. Because we typically have people that will come in as a juvenile detention counselor or a senior admin clerk or an on-call. They'll become interested in the career. They will be able to now promote throughout the department to be a juvenile detention counselor, be able to switch over to a probation officer, to be able to go through an administrative track. Because what we find is that we do get people in, but we just can't keep them because we don't have a promotable enough structure so that they can make a career. And that's what we want to be able to look at within our department. In restructuring and everything that we've been doing over the past couple of years, we've really taken a look at what is efficient within our department so that we can create the best workflow. A lot of people have taken on extra duties and they're doing extra supervisory duties over other people. Our juvenile detention counselors have taken on extra assignments with creating programs and running programs within the juvenile hall, so that we have different skill sets that the kids are walking out with. And this day and age, we're dealing with a little bit tougher kid. We also have to deal with their parents and their family members. So it's not fixing just one child, it's fixing, the whole family unit there. And in probation, we really looked at taking an evidence-based practices approach. And I think that to keep the people that we have, keep them interested in the career, that we need to be able to do something with our structure. And when we looked at this, it made it promotable so that everybody would have an opportunity to stay longer term. And everything else is within your packet. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, the one question I have, and it actually goes back to Julie maybe more than anything. These numbers, when you look at the cost, increase in cost, is that just the base salary cost, or is that cost including the benefit costs that would be associated with the salary?
It's the entire cost based on the people who are currently in those positions.
The ones that are currently in the positions. So, but when you increase the salary cost, there's ramifications to some of that through your benefits. In other words,
That's included.
So that's all included.
Yes.
Actually, I didn't, I guess I either missed that if it was presented, but this is actually what the bottom line budget would be necessary to adjust to reflect all the
That's my
change.
most reasonable estimate.
Yeah.
There are some assumptions built in.
Right.
Intended to be all
I
the
just wanted to make sure, because when we were dealing with, 2,000 and 3,000 and stuff with the smaller department, you don't really think about when you hit $59,000, then we start with, okay, does that include everything, or what else comes with that?
And I would also note that we did reduce a couple of positions as well, in order to help create some of the promotable structure for a career path.
Any questions about probation? There's also a few probation changes in the CCP section.
Which would be the same as they are within probation.
What's your client load now? Let's say, what's your population-wise that you're dealing with cases and stuff compared to where you were a year ago and 5 years ago?
I didn't look at 5 years ago, but I can tell you that we're right around 425 total between our juvenile division and our adult division. And we've recently added pretrial services, so I'm not exactly sure where that's going to go with some of our caseloads. But I know that it's up probably about 15 to 25 people from last year, just approximately. I can bring those numbers back.
It would be good to kind of know a little bit of that history so we can understand. And you added pretrial services, and who's that for? The courts?
That's with a grant through the courts, and we're working with the Sheriff's Department, and we go in every day, we assess everybody who's been booked that day to see if they qualify for pretrial services.
So offsetting some of this funding potential increase would be some of the funding you're getting by these added services?
Yes.
Yeah, because I think it really would be important to incorporate that, and I think this would be true for any of the other departments. When we got into, like, when we were dealing with the family resource centers and stuff, and we were dealing with their space needs and stuff here a couple, 2-3 weeks ago, and one of the things that came out in that presentation was how they've expanded, and they have this program and that program and need for this space, and they actually in some cases moved into additional space that they were able to acquire, which is all well and good with the program, but there's cost ramifications when you take on extra duties than maybe what you had before. And it's nice that we can do that and we'll do that, but then when that generates the demand for impacts your staffing and the staffing costs, I think it's going to be really important that you also bring to the table some added revenue. So it's nice for you to be generous with our money, is what I'm saying. And I think that's something that the board is going to have to look at really closely. It's not that we don't recognize the need for maybe some of the pay adjustments and doing the competitive salaries and that's one thing, but we want to be really attuned to the fact that if we're taking on added responsibilities in the department or a program that's going to generate these additional costs, you might want to be prepared to come up with some added revenue to offset that. So when the courts are
And we did do that through the courts and then through our medical administrative activities.
Yeah, and I both of those I appreciate what as soon as there, but I just, since you're up first, I want to use that as an example of what I think part of the dynamic, especially for the newer folks in the room who are dealing with their budgets and stuff. So that's something that would be definitely on the radar. So. And it wouldn't hurt to, when you make your presentation, that you incorporate a little bit of that so that you don't have to wait for somebody to say, hey, wait a minute, and where's the money that goes with that? So, good job.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jen? Because everybody else is saying, we're not going to support that because we want to save that money for class. So that's good. Your turn will be next. Okay. Richard?
What has been the correctional maintenance supervisor, which has transitioned quite a bit over the years. It started seeing its first changes when the sheriff's office moved from this from here on Lassen Street, and once it moved down to across the street from the jail, because what used to be the correctional maintenance person then kind of became the sheriff's maintenance person, and he took over all of the duties there at the sheriff's office as well. And we just got a chance to talk about him at the employee recognition last month, so we got to talk a lot about what that job is. And he really is everything from
More than just maintaining the right.
more than just maintaining the, mowing the lawns at the jail. So he inherited the sheriff's office. He has now inherited the substation in Doyle. He will be inheriting the substation in Westwood. So that just it just keeps growing. On top of, gaining the SO back in 2002, the other big difference was when the CCF closed in 2011, because there was a lot more labor pool to draw from. So Mike's had to transition from working with a crew of inmates and helping direct their activities to really the job's just changed a lot. And as we've heard from, whether it was Bob's discussion about contracts and public maintenance stuff to what Larry talked about, everything is some version of a contract and a prevailing wage. And so Mike has really had to change the way he does his work. So what we've asked is, although the spreadsheet shows that that's a 15-17, it's not. It's a 15 straight up. It's inaccurate in the budget book. So he is a range 15. We're asking that go to an 18, and we came up with that because really his duties are very similar to the maintenance supervisor of Public Works. So that was that was the other tie. Not just as his job changed, but it helps tie him to a like county department. And I appreciate that, Jim. All these things, I think, ripple effect. I think that if Larry were here to say that maintenance supervisor should be a 20, I would make that same argument for Mike McGarva, because I think there's a lot of similar duties going on in a lot of departments.
Well, and part of the boards, when they deliberate and discuss it, that's what they're going to be looking to administrative personnel offices, to make sure that as we're making an adjustment for any particular position, what are the comparables to that position and where do they fit and what sort of adjustments need to be made there. So when we make an adjustment like that, even for, let's say in your case here, we want to make sure that there's parity and fairness to the others that are keyed on that same basis, whichever department you may be in. So the one disadvantage of getting into a lot of personnel changes like this here is the ripple effect that it can have through the system. And in the past, the board's been fairly criticized. Some people may think it's unfair. Been fairly criticized in the fact that we have accommodated departments on a case-by-case basis to make adjustments. And when we do, and just one simple adjustment, we take and adjust Julie as an example, since she's doing this should out to everybody else. And we do that, and all of a sudden there's like half a dozen people say, well, we do the same thing that Julie does. And
we bring our maintenance person up similar to like duties in Public Works.
Yeah. And I think that's a good argument to make sure it's advanced when that discussion takes place.
The next one we have on the board is correctional clerk. Again, we've put a lot of energy into that job description. It was very, very dated. What we're hoping to do with the correctional clerks is actually change them from correctional clerks to correctional technicians. And right now, most of what they do, it is all of the computation of outdates and putting money on inmates' books, and all of the bookings and releases and calculating, working with the courts and all those things. But what we're hoping to accomplish here is to gain some additional duties from them. And move them into correctional technicians. There's a lot of different definitions of that position throughout the state, whether they're custody assistants or correctional assistants or whatever they're called. But the goal would be to have extra bodies in the jail that if we need them to go up and run a control board, they can. And right now that's way outside of their job description. The other thing is right now there's not a time that we have them make direct contact with inmates. Unfortunately, with our staffing and with the number of bodies we don't have in that jail at any given time, we need particularly women. And right now, all of the correctional clerks are women. That's not always the case. That it floats with applications. But we have to have women in that building. We have to have trained women that if we need to go do it, we're required to do an hourly health and welfare check on every single inmate. Make sure we have living, breathing inmates in our custody. Well, if we don't have women on the floor, that's obviously we can't get that done. So we're spending a lot of time, whether it's with overtime or making other adjustments, because we have to have at least a woman in the building. The other time we have to have women is any time a woman gets booked, because we can't We can't be a part of any kind of cross-gender searches. So if we have a woman getting booked, we have to have a woman to search them, especially if they're going to get housed and they have to be strip searched. So if we make these folks correctional technicians, we don't intend to put them in a spot where they're going to be in, in a use of force scenario or having to actually, go in any kind of direct combat with an inmate. But we need to put them in a spot where they're going to be in direct contact with, to just to help keep the operation propped up. So we considered going from a 10 to a 12, just to account for all of the range and duties that have changed over the years. They're doing all of our extraditions, and you can see that in the job description. I won't belabor all the things that they do now that they didn't used to do, but that just didn't get it done when we talked about all the things we really want them to do.
Yeah, I think what you need to do though is to try to quantify what that extra 20% that you're really, in terms of additional work,
Yes.
above and beyond. So
And it's in the job description,
Yeah.
Jim. We really, there's a lot of info in there.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, but I think most people, being lay people, and this board obviously
In the field. When the jail opened in 1991, that turned into a split classification. Deputy sheriffs have to go through a police academy. So that was a cost-saving measure at the time. It created a secondary classification so people didn't have to go through a basic law enforcement academy. The correctional officer training is less. It's a core course and it's arrest and firearms. So it broke away from the old Deputy 1, Deputy 2 mold, but it kept us from having to try and recruit academy graduates to go to work in our jail. So that was kind of how that split took place. So with the correctional officers, again, we made some. We didn't do like Maury as far as. I mean, I understand you did more expansive research. We didn't compare to Shasta or Butte or the federal prison or do a mini Shannon study for purposes of ours. I mean, really, we looked at the duties today versus the duties of yesterday, and then we also looked at other stuff going on in the county. So with the COs in particular, we are asking to create a correctional 1-2 position. We've already talked a lot about some of the things that go with that. I will say that no job in county government has changed more in the last 5 years than correctional officer. I mean, our jail is not a jail anymore, it's a prison. We've pounded this to death since the governor signed AB 109. It is a different environment, and because of that, that job has changed dramatically. They're guarding felons every single day now, and it used to be we guarded felons, but we guarded them pre-trial. And to go back to your point again, Jim, where you talked about all of these things ripple against one another, and with probation, we made a comparison from CO to juvenile hall counselor, and I'll make that again as I look at because there's a discussion about upping the juvenile hall counselor range, which is great. We support that. I understand the kids are more difficult, but I will say they are kids, and there's a difference between guarding 6 kids and guarding 120 felons. And David Bates and Benjamin and the murderers that are sitting in our jail right now. And if a juvenile hall counselor is going up, a CO cannot make less money than somebody guarding children, 6 kids in a hall. And so we'll make that debate when the time comes. But we made those comparisons to other local county departments. And of course, with the correctional officer 1-2, right now there's a 10% separation in pay between COs and CO supervisors. So if there is a bump, or if there is a CO 1-2 series created, just the ripple effect again is we'd have to have some consideration for the soups. The soups jobs has changed a ton. Again, we have more litigious inmates. We have all of the things that come with housing felons every day. But if there is a correctional 1-2, then we would have to consider the ripple effect that would create, because obviously we have to have some break. We have to have some incentive for people to want to promote, to be our watch commanders, to take the lead on the ground. And then we did the same thing with deputy sheriff, coroner 1 and 2, the same kind of scenario. Deputy sheriff work, we've put a lot more emphasis on our coroner's function in the past 5 years. We're really putting a lot more energy. That's a huge part of our operation. We spend a lot of time going to 911 calls and investigating crimes, but we handle a lot of death investigations all the time. And we've ramped up our training, we've ramped up our efforts, and so the biggest change that we're seeing with deputy work, really, part of it's related to our coroner's function, and then another part of it's just related to our world today, between with the changes that just came out in Prop 47, now a year and a half ago. That job is it's just more complicated now than it's ever been. There's so much more interpretive things that happen trying to work through felonies versus misdemeanors versus different, the laws of arrest, the search and seizure. There's a lot. And again, I would encourage everybody, at least the budget committee, to look at the packet, to look at the job descriptions, because we put a lot of detail into those.
John,
Yes.
going back up there, it used to be supervisor, and now you're gonna make that corporal. I mean, why can't you just keep the super? I mean, why do we change it to corporal?
Aaron, so going way back, those people have had 2 stripes for forever. They weren't made sergeants, again, so some of this goes all the way back to 91. We had deputy 1s and 2s, we switched to correctional officers. So the difficulty at the time was, if we put 3 stripes on their sleeve and they were sergeants, would there ever be any confusions as to the rank structure, whether it be a patrol sergeant versus a jail sergeant, and who had authority over whom? So all the way back many sheriffs ago, they wore 2 stripes, and we just always called them supervisors. So we could really call them whatever we want, but they wear corporal stripes. We have sergeants in the jail now, so there's no doubt, how that hierarchy goes. It's very clean that it's an officer followed by a corporal, or a supervisor followed by a sergeant. So really that's more of a language cleanup than anything. But even if we called them correctional supervisors, we'd still have to have some measure of separation between them and correctional 2s.
John, on that correctional corporal, you're proposing a 17 to a 20, which would then be 15% above the correctional deputy 2. Right? So just the math doesn't seem, the pattern doesn't seems like that would be a 19.
I agree. I thought we called them 19s in here, but I can be wrong.
Okay.
I could be too. I agree. I could have pulled it out of the
And then, of course, the last one would be, it's the same discussion with, we need at least a 10% separation between a deputy and a sergeant. And the difficulty there, Richard, and I put that as 21 or 2, the problem is with the way things shaped out in bargaining last time, so there's historically always been a 15% separation there. Now it's 12.5, which I think is ample. The problem is if there becomes a deputy 2, then that really creeps it up. So I wouldn't, the only reason I put...
Deputy 2 with the 6th staff.
Right. So the problem is I wouldn't say range 22. What I would say is 21, but we need that other 2.5. There needs to be a 10% break between a deputy and a sergeant. It's just five just isn't enough, and there's a disparity in their health care contributions. So right now, if a deputy with a family promotes, they take a $100 hit in their health care. So we want to make sure that that's never a disincentive for somebody to want to compete for that next spot. So it's probably a 21.5.
Okay, any other questions? Good insight and good analysis.